Hello there. So I decided to do a video product where I interview various individuals, many of whom I'm familiar with, and their use of technology in social games such as VRChat, and how it's affected their lives, especially in the area of socialization and self-expression compared to the physical world. I also cover topics of how people may have used VR to cope during the time of the pandemic. So I'll be releasing these videos individually, and if you're interested or curious in the topic of VR or a longtime VR user and have experience with social games such as VRChat, I hope you'll find the different answers people provide to be valuable. So I'll be interviewing Psypher the Psynergist. Thank you for stopping by, I appreciate it. I will be asking some questions, so feel free to answer in a way that makes you comfortable. So if you're ready, we will begin. Okay, so Psypher, I've known you you're from the Vine Sauce community. I don't actually remember when I met you. I don't know if it was through VRChat or just doing projects on Discord or just, random stuff through the community. I don't know if you remember, but I've known you for quite a good while.
The earliest memory I have was when you were doing VRChat map pops and I would watch your streams and then you would have a Discord invite link and I was like, hey, maybe this will be fun. And then eventually, once I started getting with your Discord more, I was invited to one of your map pops and I'm trying to remember the first one that I really remember. I actually have a clip on YouTube for one of the funnier moments, but what I originally remember was I'm trying to remember that famous VR map author that we went to a whole bunch of different maps for.
I actually don't remember.
There were these out there maps. It's all good. It was a couple years ago at this point, maybe 3.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember the maps being very psychedelic and out there and very ersatz. I very much enjoyed them.
I wonder if that was the Active Worlds dev maps, because I know Corvus had shown us those, a bunch of those, so it may have been those or something similar. I
even got VR because of your VRChat map pops, and I was very glad I did. That was just after the pandemic.
Oh, that's
and
actually...
I needed some time to be able to escape meat space, as you may say.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That was the perfect way to do it.
That's actually one of the questions I actually have here. But it does seem a lot of people ended up meeting me via the VRChat map stuff that I did, the community stuff earlier on. So it's nice to get to know people better that way. And that's kind of the whole theme of what I'm talking about here with the questions as well. When you're doing VRChat, were you on desktop first or did you use it on a VR headset?
My first experience was with a VR headset. I never really went into it on the desktop. So
Okay.
I didn't really have a comparison for it. I just knew that as soon as I got into VR, I loved it and I wanted to keep doing it.
Do you remember when that was? What was your first? Do you remember the earlier times experiencing VRChat? Do you remember what that was like and your impression of it?
The first map I ever went on was when Corvus was testing my VR legs, and he made me start with Techno Vinegar.
Oh no!
And that map was a lot.
That's quite a ride in VR.
I handled it okay. I think that showed that I had good VR legs at the time. Not everyone does. Some people never get them, and it just felt natural to me. I didn't get sick or anything.
Yeah, for me, I'll probably mention this earlier or later in the video too. For me, I had a little motion sickness, but and I did the ginger stuff, and eventually I got adjusted to it. Sometimes throwing yourself against a wall, essentially in VR, forcing yourself to experience stuff that'll make you sick, actually sometimes makes you get used to it. Let's see.
That's literally how I learn everything.
Exactly.
Bang your head against the wall until things make sense.
Exactly. So you did mention that the VRChat hangouts with your various friends that encourage you to get a headset. Was there any other things that encouraged you to get you're using an Index, right? Is there anything that affected that decision?
At the time, it was the best headset on the market, and I figured if I'm going to splurge a lot for VR, I might as well go big. So I went with that option, and it's still running great. Albeit the cord issue sometimes pops up, but it hasn't been too bad.
I have the same exact problem. As Index users, we have to deal with replacing the cord every once in a while. Now, since you're become used to using VR and socializing with people in VR, what was your first experience with VR? Actually, okay, you already mentioned that. I was gonna say, what was your first experience with VR? What headset did you use? But you already essentially answered that. Did you have what was your impression of the virtual space though, experiencing it for the first time compared to everything else?
I really liked how immersive it was. I didn't expect it to at first. It was to a point where I wanted to bring it over to a friend's house and be like, yo, you gotta check this out. It's not like what they say. It's actually really cool. And it's not something you can really explain to someone. They have to experience it for themselves.
Exactly. Someone had actually explained to me, because before I had got my VR headset, I started in VRChat and desktop as well, and eventually I got encouraged to I got an Index, but someone told me it was going from 3D to 4D, and I just didn't quite get what that meant until you don't quite get that until you actually are in here, being
That's
able
a good
to
way of
experiencing
putting
it. Yeah.
You still can't know until you're there.
So we're going to go over some socialization stuff, since that is the topic at hand. When it comes to socialization in the physical space, reality, meet space, whatever you want to call it, how would you describe yourself in your interactions with other people, and how does this translate to text or voice-based interactions online? Because there's real space, physical space, and then there's the internet space, which I would consider separate to virtual reality.
I feel like to appreciate the VR space, I should start with how I feel in real space, or meat space rather. They're both real in my mind. But in meat space, I'm a very anxious person socially. Extroverted, introvert. Sometimes I switch between. But in order to fix that, I would basically do what I like to call weaponizing my anxiety, where I basically purposefully put myself in a high energy state to try to handle being in social situations for longer. Problem is, that's very exhausting to do for long periods. But I feel like when I'm in a VR space, I don't have to do that. And I think part of it is it's putting yourself in a social situation where you can escape at any time you want. Like, you can just take the headset off if things get dicey, or you can just leave the world. You can't really do that in a meat space setting without it being super awkward.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, bye guys, and then just drive home. But that's not an issue in VR. You can just go into it knowing that you have an out.
Exactly. Your meat in the real space, your meat's being perceived. You have to deal with,
perceived meat.
Yes. Let's see. Okay. Now, in terms of using VR for a while and getting used to it, did using VR actually change the way you interact with others compared to interacting in the physical space, or compared to doing text or voice-based stuff on the internet?
I feel it let me practice expressing myself in a way that other people understood better, because I would be in meat space. It was very difficult for me to articulate how I felt or how I wanted others to either perceive me or just even know what I was talking about. But in a VR space, because of my lack of need to weaponize my anxiety, I would be able to express myself more freely. And that's helped me with social situations in meat space by being able to articulate better.
Exactly. I suppose I didn't write this down as a question, but it came to mind. Another thing you kind of don't have to worry about as much is body language, which people are going to definitely pay attention to in real life. And if you're someone that's got anxiety, you're probably going to be really self-conscious of what you're doing with your body, right? Your physical body.
Which is really funny, because people are reintroducing that issue by wanting to have full body tracking.
Exactly. But at least you can look cool now. You can wear, you can have whatever body you want, and just I guess because there's more freedom of expression in the virtual space, and if you do start to express body language, maybe you just feel less anxious about it, actually showing people stuff. Did you use VRChat during the pandemic, and did it help you cope with it in any way? Because there was a lot of people who made use of it.
Absolutely, yes. I didn't have very many social outings or anything like that during the pandemic, other than just working. And for the majority of the pandemic, I was very lucky because, for one, I had quit my job at the time. I was working at a grocery store, and this was just before lockdowns. So this was like November of 2019, I want to say.
Oh, wow.
And I had gotten a office job, and my first month was January of 2020. And then the lockdowns happened, and then I just did remote work from then. And that was extremely well timed. I hadn't planned for that. But I count my blessings that I wasn't exposed to the pandemic nearly as much as other essential workers were.
Yeah.
As a result of that. And VRChat alleviated a lot of a lack of social situations for me. And I feel like if I didn't have that, I would have forgotten a lot of like social etiquette and skills. And yeah, so I'm just thankful for VRChat for that.
That's actually was a worry when a lot of students had to switch to remote, remote methods of learning too. I don't know if it happened, from what I heard, it happened in like workplace settings as much. It may have happened like over time as people were doing remote more, but I did hear like when a lot of kids switched over to like remote learning, and they just stuck with that for like even more than a year because things were going on for a while, that they started to like socially regress. So, and then a lot of kids end up getting acquainted to like VR and VRC, so I'm sure that ended up helping people as well. And because in the VR space, at least, you can kind of like move and do things that you can't quite behind a computer screen to kind of like give back that humanness when it comes to interacting. So I'm sure it helped a lot of people out during the pandemic.
It's difficult for me to perceive what it would have been like as a teenager going through that, because at least as an adult, I have events in my past that I could compare it to where, yeah, I went through, I want to say like normal school versus like non-remote learning. So it's difficult for me to compare that situation that they had to deal with and not have anything to compare it to for them. So it's just like, how would it have been like growing up as a teenager going through the pandemic and dealing with those school settings?
Yeah.
Changes.
It's a very like sensitive time because we're still in the process of developing and figuring things out socially. So I feel for them.
Exactly.
Definitely. Let's see. Have you noticed or observed any changes in other people between the time they were introduced to VR until now? Like in your interactions with others? I guess you'd have to like...
I'd have to think about it on a person-to-person basis.
Yeah.
How would you want that answered in terms of privacy concerns?
You can answer however you want, however you feel comfortable. In terms of information, you don't have to mention names, if that would be best.
Okay. I figured that might be best. But generally speaking, I'd say the group that I've hung out with, specifically the Jackal Discord, going through our hangouts and watching streams and such, I feel like a lot of people have gotten more vocal in terms of being able to express themselves just over time. That may be a combination of things. It could be a combination of getting comfortable around people you know, or just being in a virtual space where you wouldn't normally be able to articulate how you may feel, like I had mentioned earlier. Or it may just be people growing up too.
That's good to hear, actually. I'm happy. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad, like, it's,
I definitely feel people have progressed for the better while doing these VRChat hangouts.
Yeah, it's certainly, from what I've observed, I've certainly been seeing that, for sure. Okay, so we're going to go over a sense of self. What about identity or the sense of self and self-expression? Do you feel like your time in the VR social space, such as places like VRChat, have influenced or changed things about you, or allowed you to explore yourself in a way that is different from the physical space, or different from, the internet space?
I'd say it's affected me a lot, and also for the better. For one, it helped me kind of grasp the concept of gender a lot better. because it's difficult in the meat space to express that or even perceive it, as well as in a VR space where people are more comfortable with themselves. And I've even been exploring the idea of possibly being um, either bisexual or at least bicurious, whereas I wouldn't be in meat space.
Mhm.
It's just an idea of being able to be more comfortable with oneself.
Yeah, it's more open here, and you don't have to. I guess the thing is just like you're not having to worry about being attached to a meat body so much. So, and you
That's
can,
very helpful.
yeah, you can kind of just change forms too, which might sound so alien to people who aren't used to VR chat, but being able to switch how you look or get into a body that you feel comfortable with, or use it as a way to explore
For
other
those
types of bodies, then.
for those not used to the concept, I would liken it akin to cosplaying. If people have ever been doing that, it's a much cheaper way of doing it.
Oh,
You can
for
just
sure.
change a costume versus just trying to like set up an entire like persona that you're trying to do in meat space. It's
Oh,
much
yeah.
easier to just test it out and have fun with it in VR and see if you like it before you spend all that money and try to do it.
I'm sure the convenience also helps with the whole social, like just the freedom of it and the ease of use. I'm sure that it just makes it easier, more accessible to people as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, what is your opinion on VR being used for mental health therapy? 'Cause I feel like it's
I'm
definitely
a
related.
huge proponent of that. Anything to do with like PTSD, I would imagine that would be a great assistance tool to help with that. Just being able to deal with anxiety, bringing it back up earlier, being able to figure that out. Um, just any, I hesitate to say mental health disorder because it's more just things you deal with, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different way of perceiving things.
It's definitely it's an option that I do support myself, especially since it's, not everyone has a VR headset, but it is something that you could acquire, like people might have for gaming or other uses. But it's like, oh well, this thing could be used for mental health therapy as well, and based on like some of the therapy that I went through, it's sort of similar to I forgot the name, but there's an immersive therapy where you look at images. I think it's like guided imagery, guided therapy, where you look at images and music and immerse yourself into like an environment. But usually, it's done like where you're just looking at a video or something with headphones. But now we have this tool that can completely submerge you into an environment that can help out, and I'm sure that's helpful for a lot of different cases as well. Something you can kind of temporarily escape into if you need to.
It is kind of depressing to think of it like this, but let's say you're in like the concrete jungle of a city and you're never going to see the forest or the ocean in your life because how far away you are from it, for example. VR allows you to enter those environments and at least try to have some semblance of an idea of what that might be like.
It's a very positive way to look at it, because someone else might say, oh, well, that's something from a sci-fi novel, and that sounds very dystopian, but hey, it's the reality, and it does help at least, because that's our reality.
It's the world we live in, we just gotta make the most of it,
Yes, exactly. It's a tool. It's something to be used, and it can help out if needed as well.
I remember we were talking about the concept of like positive nihilism. It's kind of in that perspective of it.
Exactly. Yeah. You just gotta embrace what you have around, and try to it's basically just making the best of your situation, what you have, trying to make it the best of it and what tools you have around. So the final thing is, if you could recommend the use of VR to others in ways that are not associated with just gaming, what reasons would you provide?
That's a good conclusive question because it just brings it all back together to what I was already bringing up earlier. Just the idea of if you need an escape, VR is a really good use of it. Even if you just want to hang out with others that you can't hang out with very commonly in meat space due to distance reasons or what have you, you're able to do that. If you just want to spend alone time in the forest, you can do that too. Like the limits of VR are only what you can come up with.
Exactly. It's only limited to our imagination and what we are able to create. And the tech, because the tech can be limited, but it's
Yeah.
getting there. It's definitely, so many new things are being introduced all the time that we're
I've even
capable
been
of
seeing
doing.
cheap haptic suits, which is
Oh,
crazy
yeah.
to me.
Haptics, that's something that could be in the future that might be more accessible. I guess the limit of VR right now is just the price and not being able to afford everything, because it's definitely an investment if you do VR.
That's the unfortunate truth, is that VR is very helpful for people, but the barrier of entry is extremely high at the moment.
Yeah, it would be nice to see it more accessible in the future, and I'm sure people are working on that eventually. You brought up a good thing, though, that I forgot to mention about the distance thing. And I wanted to mention in our groups, we have a lot of people who, come from states that are far away from us, but also other countries. And I bet that's something that brought a lot of people together, especially during the pandemic, is you have this, like, space where people can interact with each other in a safe way, too, because you're in VR, not physically, but brings all these people from different countries and long distances together, and to be able to interact in a way that's close to human. And I'm sure it's helped that a lot during a very stressful time.
Just the idea of you don't have to feel isolated if you're in a space that may not be very good for hanging out in real life, but at least with VR, you still have a way of hanging out with people if you need to.
Definitely, for sure. So, thank you for your time, Cypher. I really appreciate your input. I'm sure other people will appreciate what you have to say about this topic as well. And thank you for coming. If you like this video project and would like to reach out for an interview yourself, feel free to contact me here on the various social platforms that I'm on, and I'll be happy to set one up. Thank you again for watching. I appreciate it.